Hello everybody, welcome to another video of Elevated Prep. I'm Nathan Wheeler. Today's video is going to be specific about the genre types of preppers. And I don't really think that anybody's ever done this before, not that I have seen, and I think it's important. I think that the prepping community should embrace this, the putting genres of prepper types. And the reason, just starting the video off, I want to identify, I think the reason why this is important is because when you Google or you search on, YouTube or any type of social media, prepping, you're going to find these different type of approaches that are so different from each other. Oh, well, this is what you got to do to be prepared. Well, no, this is what you got to do to be prepared. You got to buy this. Well, no, you got to buy that. And so you have these very different schools of thought about what it is to be prepared. And I'm not seeing a whole lot of crossover. And as I go through the list, I'll explain where I feel the crossover is missing. There is some, but I feel like there's not a lot of crossover in acknowledging the other types, because I feel like a lot of people are just convicted that what they have deduced as the most important part of prepping is what is the most important part of prepping for everybody. And that's definitely not the case. And we do have plenty of content makers out there that are saying, hey, this might not be right for you. But I've noticed that when they say that, and you pay attention to them, see if I'm right, when they say this might not be right for you, they're still talking about their genre of prepping. So they might say something like a Scandinavian blade might not be right for you on your knife, or, this axe type, a forest axe compared to a hatchet, that might not be right for you, right? So they're not talking outside of their genre. They're just talking about people within their genre, what might be right or what might not be right. And what that does for the people who might be new to prepping is they might be thinking like, okay, so I need that too. I need to have one of those too. And for every genre out there, if you bought everything, you'd be super overwhelmed. You'd have to be probably pretty wealthy to purchase everything. So by identifying the genres of preppers, I believe that we will eliminate a lot of the analysis paralysis that specifically a lot of new people to prepping are having, because there's so much information that is labeled prepping or survival, and it's for all different people type, and they have to either just figure out what's right for them, but there's not really anybody out there going, hey, let me help you figure out what genre type you're at, because people aren't even identifying themselves as a genre of prepper type. So that's what I'm going to do today. And then I'm going to, in the future, when I highlight somebody else's video or content, I'm going to say this content is really for this type of genre, or this content crosses over to multiple genres, and I will be able to explain that. So I hope this is actually embraced by the prepper community and people start using these prepper types so that they can help people not feel overwhelmed. It's not about putting people in a box and limiting them. It's about helping people to find their place and find where they need to start their prepping journey at. So the first group I have is the militant group. These are your ex-military guys. They're heavily focused on defense, weapons trainings, bug out bags, your EDC bag, that's an everyday carry bag. Do you have a conceal on you? Do you have a rifle, a shotgun? What kind do you have? There's zombie apocalypse preparers, things like that. And it makes sense. I mean, if you live in the military, you have a military background and you are going to prepare for hard times, you're going to prepare with a military mindset. And I do believe that everybody should be learning from these type of guys, whether you are about that type of life or about that type of protection. I still think you should learn it. You might need it. And so, I think it's important that people, again, we don't push any of these categories out. The goal is to unify all these categories, but identify them so that people can find their place. So the militant group, they're just preppers who are highly focused on, fighting, shooting, things like that, killing, not murderously, but defense, right? Hunting, things like that. So, and other people might be involved in hunting too. It's not just the militant group, but that's kind of like what a lot of their content is about. you know, what can you carry? What can you get home with bag? Do you have a bag in the car? Do you have a bag at home that's ready to go so you and your family can run out right away? The bug out kind of group is usually the militant group. And then it's not always. There are obviously, I'm putting that out there now. When I say usually is this, I'm not saying everybody. I want to make sure that that's clear. Obviously, there's going to be crossover. There's going to be people who are in one category but do things that others in the other categories do. Obviously, that's going to happen. The next group is the homestead and farmer group. The people who buy homesteads to prepare. They might be moving from the city or the suburbs and they want to have a piece of land, whether it's a half an acre or 100 acres, and they want to grow their own garden. They want to have their own chickens so they can have their own eggs and meat and stuff like that. And, they're trying to be, they can be on grid or they can be off grid, but they want their own piece of land so that they can grow their own food and they can learn how to survive on what God gave us. But they want to have usually a home that's made of modern materials, but not always. Sometimes they have an earth ship, as like in New Mexico, they build their home in the ground, or they build their home in a cave, or in a treehouse, or something like that. So you can be a homesteader and live in a cabin, But the homesteader movement, if you will, is not a homestead prepper movement. So that's another thing that I want to point out, because I know that a lot of the homestead preppers are watching homesteader content or videos, and the danger of that is that there's a lot of homesteaders who are teaching their techniques and how they do things for their homestead business and for their homestead lifestyle. And a lot of that has to do with going to the store every season and buying what that season needs. And if you're a prepper, you should be having the mentality that there's going to be a day where you will not be able to go to the store. You will not be able to go to the doctors to get your animal meds or call the vet, and the vet's going to come up and fix your animals for you, right? That's not something that most of these homesteaders are talking about. And so there's a lack of communication, there's a lack of knowledge that's not being shared or discussed or prepared for, which is the day when the lights go out, the phones are dead, the cars aren't running, and the stores are closed and empty, right? So even on the homestead front, most of the content that people are learning from people who are living in a modern homestead way. And so it's actually can be dangerous because they're going to become familiar with a life where they go to the store to get what they need every season. And so we need to be highlighting homestead prepping, which is preparing for when you can't go to the store, but you have your homestead. So that's an important thing. There's the nomad who lives in the RV, in the van. There's that type of prepper. They feel that living in one place is not for them. They want to be able to be flexible. They want to be able to pack up and move and go wherever they need to go. Some people will be thrown into this because they won't be able to stay home due to danger or disasters or robbery or something like that. And they will be forced to become nomadic. And so we can learn again from the people who are preparing in this category. But once again, a lot of nomad style people, lifestyle people who are living that lifestyle now, they go to the store, they go to the grocery store and they get their food that way, obviously. And they fill their gas with their cars at a gas station, right? And so while the idea of being a nomadic prepper is something many people might have to do, whether they like it or not, being a nomadic prepper is not taught as much as the nomad life is. So again, just like homestead, there's homesteading and then there's homestead prepping. And then there's being nomadic and then there's being nomadic as a prepper. And these are the things that I want to highlight the difference of. And it's unfortunate that there's not that extra genre really highlighted. There's not that nomadic prepping genre. There's not that homestead prepping genre. It's just homesteading. And so people have to kind of fill in these blanks. And I hope that the blanks get filled in sooner than later for the community's sake. Then there's the digital prepper. I don't think anybody would probably ever think of this as a prepping group. But I consider anybody who perceives some type of catastrophe or some type of danger to society or themselves or their community that they need to react to ahead of time so that they can have it better than they would if they didn't react ahead of time. That to me is the definition of prepping. And a digital prepper is somebody like a hacker, like the Anonymous group, or people I like to call they're like digital warriors, not keyboard warriors, which are trolls and people who just want to come on social media and bother people, but like authentic digital warriors. They're people who are creating digital tools, they're creating digital technologies, even that people can go and buy, or teaching people how to build them, ways to communicate without cell phone service, with ways to have all the knowledge of the internet at their disposal on their computers. They can run off of a solar panel, but aren't connected to the grid. So when the internet goes down, they still have all the knowledge they need to for medical purposes or for gardening or farming or anything building. They have all that knowledge at their fingertips just the same. So there are these preppers who are preparing for the world to one day not have the internet or not have electricity, and they help people them by creating technology to prepare for that. So these are digital preppers. Then you have political preppers, people who feel that their safety, honestly, at the end of the day, is going to rely on the government. It's going to be in the hands of, hopefully, good government leadership. And so for them, the way that they prepare for the future is by getting involved in politics and voting. And they feel that, look, I don't have the money, I don't have the means or resources, I'm not going to have cows and pigs and learn how to do all that. I just want my government not to be corrupt anymore. So I'm going to get involved and I'm going to be either a supporter, a politician, or a volunteer of some sort, or I'm going to be a protester. And that's their way of preparing. They are seeing the catastrophe, or they're seeing the direction of the demise of society, or the world that they live in, and they are making some type of movement or effort to correct course. And so, again, their vote is how they're really preparing, but they are indeed preppers. And then you have the conspirator preppers. You may not feel like this should have its own genre, but I feel like there are people who probably feel a little bit strange and they probably feel misunderstood. And they are people who are basically conspiracy theorists. But they're not worried on whether we landed on the moon or not. They're not worried if the earth is round or flat. They're only worried about what they feel like the deep state or the evil government is doing to either kill us over time or will one day destroy us or will one day, ruin everything, right? And so to them, preparing is finding the hidden clues in society and movies and TV shows or music or something like that. And they're trying to find the hidden clues of all the evil and the satanic stuff going on. And this is what they're doing. And they're trying to bring it to the public. They're trying to tell as many people as possible. That doesn't mean that they're buying water, stocking water or canned food. It doesn't mean that they have an axe they can go cut down a tree or a trap to trap a squirrel or rabbit to eat. Their form of preparing is finding the conspiracies that are coming against us and then telling everybody about it. And I think a lot of people would say, well, that's not prepping. What I'm witnessing is the preparer heart, the prepping heart is there. And the way that they deal with it might be different than the person who buys the homestead and starts raising chickens. But they have the same concerns and they see the same things happening. They're just responding in a different way. And again, by identifying this type of prepper, we can welcome them into the group. We can welcome them into the preparing community. And what happens is that when we do welcome in more people in the community, we have more of our weaknesses get filled by somebody else's strengths. And the more our community comes together and grows and builds, the stronger we all are. And so I think that for the fact that we're not taking into consideration that somebody can have a preparing heart and deal with prepping differently than the homesteader or the militant or the political person. There's people out there who have a different approach. And maybe one of the other most famous type of preppers out there are what I call the bushcrafters. These are the people who are doing the camping and the hiking, and they make a shelter in the forest with maybe only a knife or something like that. Or the person who goes out, and they only have their t-shirt and jeans and boots on, and they go out to the wilderness and they take a rock and they cut down a tree with it. They rub two sticks together to make a fire. So you have these bushcrafters, and these are the people who have inspired shows like Alone or Naked and Afraid. Um, the militant group, I think, often pulls from the bushcrafters. The militant group will often make videos of like camping, survival in the woods type of videos as well. But it's obviously a different feel than people who are just bushcrafters. And I think a bushcrafter, if you don't know who it is or what it is exactly, Google it, watch some videos on it. I'll be sharing some videos, so if you don't want to do that, don't worry, sit tight. We'll be highlighting them here. Um, I consider myself a bushcrafter. It's not something I've ever really talked about publicly, but it's definitely been my passion for many years. I love it. And I think it's an important skill set for everybody to have. It doesn't matter if you are a homesteader or a van or a militant or a digital. It doesn't matter. I think everybody should be learning from the bushcrafters. I think it's an important thing because you might be out in the wilderness. You might have to escape society or your home, and you're going to need to know how to survive the weather and how to have fresh water and food and resources. So, yeah, bushcrafters is the funny thing is when you add a militant minded prepper with a bushcrafted skill set, they usually refer to themselves as survivalists and not as preppers. So, that's another word that in your research you might want to look up is just type in survivalist, and you'll find that they're half militant and half bushcraft style folks. Then you have, I guess that could be its own genre too, but I feel like you're just mingling the two, so I'd rather distinguish those two genres personally. Then you have what I call like the Amish Mennonites and the tribal folks. These are people who have been basically preparing for the end of the world before the world really got digital or industrial. And they have passed down the old ways of how to survive in the world to their kids, and their kids are very prepared. And people who live on homesteads or live in like a homestead style rural area, farmers and such, they're very familiar with the Amish and the Mennonites and native tribal people who know how to do these things because they often will go to them and say, hey, what's the alternative that you guys use in this situation? What's the alternative medicine you use? What's the alternative pest control you use? And so, even though they would probably not ever label themselves as preppers, they absolutely are, and they're absolutely experts. So, we should always be seeking them and seeking their knowledge and what things they have to offer us that we can all be elevated by, right? And then you have the mega bunker, the super yachts, the castle buyers or builders, right? You have basically the rich people, the billionaires or the 100 millionaires or the millionaires who can just spend money and build themselves like a full-on fortified bunker with all the modern technologies and the camera systems and the solar panel arrays that are massive, and they can stay basically technologically alive when the world goes off grid, and they can live in a form of luxury or protection. And it doesn't have to be luxurious. I say this kind of half jokingly. You can be a mega bunker or a prepper. You can be a bunker prepper without having a lot of money. There are people who took many years, 20, 30 years to build their bunkers for their families, and they did it piece by piece over time. So instead of spending their money on, cafe lattes and trips to France or something like that, they built a castle for their family for protection for when the end of the world comes or whatever is the catastrophe they have in mind. And so you can fit into this, but you can have a homestead with a bunker. You can be a militant person in suburbia and have a bunker in your backyard, right? So that having a bunker is not the genre that I'm talking about. I'm talking about the people who have the wealth to do the whole plan. And so we might cover videos for basically people with money, but they still don't know how to prepare, or they don't know what is the right preparation for those with money. So we'll still be covering those as well. And we'll be covering lots of stuff for people with no money at all. In fact, we'll kind of talk about a little bit of that right here. City preppers is the next category I have. People who live in the heart of the downtown metropolitan areas. They're not, I'm talking about people in like skyscraper apartment complexes, not people in homes, not in houses. I mean, it's their homes, but not houses, right? Uh, People who they either can't leave because of their job, their economics, their family, whatever, they can't leave, or they don't want to. I know people that I have conversations with about the need to prep, and they understand it and they agree, but they don't want to leave the city. They want to live right up to the end with their community, with their friends, with their lifestyle that they've worked really hard to have, or to find. They found their people and they don't want to leave the city. And that's great. And I know that there are people who are city folks who feels like who feel like they cannot prep. They feel like when they go online and they study prepping, it's like, I don't have extra room. I don't have a storage. I don't have a place, where I can put all my canned food or dry foods, or can't put my, if I even started canning food, I wouldn't even have anywhere to put it, and so they can't have a garden. Not everybody has a balcony in their apartment complex. So they feel like prepping is not an option for them, and a lot of them just give up. But the thing is there's a lot of prepping you can still do if you live in the city, and it doesn't necessarily take money. But specifically to this category of prepper, more than any other, the skill that they're going to need to have is scavenging. They're going to have to be able to go out, and they're going to have to be smart and wise and maybe sneaky, and they're going to have to be able to find things to help them sustain or to live beyond the means that they would otherwise. So scavenging is going to be super important for any city prepper. It doesn't matter if you have money or not, because eventually your money is not going to be able to grow you food. You're not going to be able to buy food because there will be no transactions. You're not going to be able to go to the store because the stores will be looted or closed or done, and there will be nothing there for you to have anyways. So your money, even if you live in a penthouse, it's not going to be useful to you for preparing in the city. Again, that's why some people feel like they can't prep, but that's just not true. And I will be happy to show content from other creators, maybe even create content that will help people to focus on how you can prepare if you are living in the city and you don't have any money. And one of the best things you can do if you live in the city, since you will have to basically become a master scavenger, is I'd start talking to homeless people. Homeless people are proven survivors. They survive every single day on sometimes nothing more than a t-shirt and a pair of pants. And I've seen them without shoes. I've seen them without anything, nothing on their person at all. I've talked to them before, and they've either been beaten up by other homeless people and all their stuff got stolen, all the stuff they saved and hid in their little makeshift home, wherever it was, in an alleyway or in a bush in the canyon or something. And they had nothing, and they still survived, and they still saw another day, and they still came back, to a better homeless life. And I would definitely encourage people to just start talking to homeless people and asking them about the reality and what they do and what it really looks like. And they may not tell you. So the best thing to do is just, whether you want to or not, if you want to prepare, I'd literally start hanging out with homeless people, at least watching them, and learning from them, because they'll survive. They'll figure out a way. The next category of preppers is suburban preppers. As the name implies, these are people who live in suburbia. They're dwellers who have usually garages on their home. They have extra rooms in their house, whether it's a guest room or something, and they can store stuff in all sorts of little nooks and crannies and closets. They're the type that goes out and buys pallets of rice and beans, and they store the pallet in either one of their rooms or in their garage. They have canned foods and dry foods. They have batteries forever and a day. They have flashlights and medical gear and things like that. They're not the downtown dwellers. They might have a little bit of a yard, so they can do a little bit of a garden. And their goal is to, before the disaster happens, is to garden as much and to prepare devices and tools and resources as much as they can before they can't go to the store. And for most of the suburban preppers out there, it seems like their goal is to last like 6 to 9 months, longer than what most people will be able to do because of the stockpile of food or supplies that they have. They'll be able to handle most medical situations that don't require emergency services. And the goal is to live long enough for FEMA or the government to arrive with aid and help and to turn the lights back on. And there's nothing wrong with that form of prepping. If that's all you have, then that's all you can do, then that's what you should do. So that's a totally different mindset, obviously, than the homestead prepper who wants to perpetually be able to live years into the future, hopefully, right? Most urban preppers, they just need to get by long enough until help arrives. And we will get to that help arriving thing in a moment, because the next on the list here, make sure I'm not skipping anything, is the gangs and mafias and just general society bullies. They are preppers, whether you want to think so or not, or whether they want to identify it as so or not, it doesn't matter. They are people who are prepared. For them living on the edge, for them making choices quickly and decisively that are do or die, that's already part of their lifestyle. So they're prepared. When disaster comes, mayhem comes, they're in their element. They're right at home. They know exactly what this looks like and they know exactly what to do. And they are skilled, and their skill set of basically, robbery, killing, blackmailing, ruling over people with fear, being opportunistic to, for instance, if your kid needs medicine and you don't have a doctor or a pharmacy to go to, you know, a gang member or a mafia person or, organized crime type of person or a bully, somebody who's basically their moral compass isn't there and they're willing to do or able to do things that your moral compass won't allow you to do. They can get you the supplies that you need. And this is how they can control a city block or a town, and they will do what they need to do to get people what they want, and in return they'll expect their loyalty and or payment of some sort. So these people are absolutely preppers. They're already living in a lifestyle that will actually be quite a good opportunity for them when disaster happens, because they can take advantage of people who are weak and in a feeble situation, and that's what they're good at already. So I'm not going to obviously promote this type of behavior or anything like that type of prepping, but I am going to highlight it because I think that's another thing that they're kind of hinted at, especially with the militant group. Oh, there's bad people out there who are going to come and take your stuff. But I don't see videos out there, I haven't found them, that addresses, hey, when the gangs show up to your place, or when the mafia shows up to your town, or when you start realizing that the only place you can get food or water is from the gangs or the criminals who have robbed everything and stolen everything or killed everybody else and taken their stuff, there's nobody addressing what to do in that situation. And when we don't have a preparation for that moment, we will have to figure out what to do on the fly. We'll have to figure it out right then and there. And I don't think most people are going to make the right choice, or they're not going to make a choice that they will later on feel probably good about. They probably will lose sleep about, or they'll probably hate themselves for. And I do know that there are people in the world who are good people who might be like, specifically like Delta Force guys. They have to go into places, they have to pretend to be somebody they're not, they have to thrive in a hostile environment, they have to figure out ways to survive where survival seems impossible, especially with somebody with a moral compass. And I feel like we can start teaching more about dealing with mafias and gangs and just what I call social bullies when people are in desperate situations, because they're going to be there and they will rise to the top. So that is a form of preppers, and they're a form of prepper that we will have to deal with if we are surviving ourselves. Now, many people find themselves identifying with one of these categories. Hopefully it's not the criminal one, but if you do, you can always switch over to another one. But there are a little bit of each of us, a little part of us finds an interest in probably in all these categories. And each one of the categories does have crossover parts, right? Everybody wants fresh water. Everybody wants to be able to filter water on the fly, you know? Everybody wants to be able to plug and charge their cell phones and see if the grid's back on, you know? There's all sorts of things that everybody can kind of relate to in all the categories. But there are things that distinguish us greatly in each one of these categories. And we shouldn't separate ourselves, but we should identify it. So that way we can understand what our place is. And when we come across content or a school of thought about prepping that doesn't match us, we should not become concerned or get anxiety about it and go, well, I don't have this. This isn't something that I don't know what to do about this, or I don't see how I can implement this. I don't have the means to implement this. And so what ends up happening for a lot of people, maybe not you who's watching right now, but I do know for a fact a lot of people get that analysis paralysis. And when they don't understand that there is very clear genres of a type of prepping, when they hear something and they can identify that's not my genre, they don't need to have anxiety about it, and they don't need to wonder how do I need to get that and put it into my regimen. So that is the bonus. And the more of that analysis paralysis we can remove, the sooner people will make decisions that are right for them in their prepping needs. So hopefully this channel will be a blessing to you. If any of the things that I'm talking about, or the fact that I've highlighted and defined these categories of prepping, and that I'm going to be highlighting content and saying, hey, this is this genre, or this is really geared more towards this genre of prepping, or this is a crossover. Everybody should know this. If that's of interest to you, hit the subscribe button now so you don't miss these videos or you don't miss this content. And if you feel that there's a genre of prepping that I totally left out, leave it in the comment section and let me know what it is so that in future videos I can be sure to mention it. One of the things that I hope this channel helps you with is, and I think will happen, is that you will learn what genre you go into or you fit into. And that may not be the genre you want. I think that's going to be a surprise for a lot of people. They may realize, I always imagined myself in this genre or this type of preparing for the future, but I realized that's just not me, or I just don't have the means. And that's going to actually help them. It might be a hard crossroad, but it will help them, because then they can start preparing the right way for where they are or who they are or what they are. Does that make sense? So I think that that's going to be an eye-opener for a lot of people, and I hope this channel does that. I got some notes here, just making sure I haven't crossed over anything. As I said, I'm going to be highlighting the different genres. I'm not going to be promoting the criminal genre, the criminal syndicate genre, but I'm going to be pointing it out so that, like I said, so we can know how to deal with it and at least have it in the conversation, so that when we, God forbid, should have to deal with it in our future, it won't take us by surprise. So that's it. That's the genres, and that's why I think it's important, not so that we can break apart the community, but so that we can unify the community and more quickly help people find their place in their path of prepping. So thank you for watching. I'm Nathan Wheeler. Like, subscribe, and share, and I hope to help you and the entire community elevate in their prep. Have a great day.